This is the Expert Series podcast from the CDA Institute, Canada's premier defense and security think tank. I'm David Borys, and it's Friday, July 24th, 2026.
I would invest in the tail in ways that my brother would probably not be happy with, because it's all about logistics, dummy. And when you don't have it, or if it's thin, you can't just go down to Walmart or go down to Ford and buy it, because it ain't there.
The federal government recently announced a nearly $2 billion contract with General Dynamics Land Systems Canada to purchase 190 additional Armoured Combat Support Vehicles, expanding Canada's planned fleet from 360 to 550. Manufactured in London, Ontario, these LAV 6.0 based platforms are earmarked primarily for domestic training bases while supporting active deployments abroad. Joining us to break down what this fleet expansion entails and how these support variants operate on the ground is Major General David Fraser. General Fraser is one of Canada's most decorated generals since World War II. He was the commander of Operation Medusa in Afghanistan, the largest combat engagement of Canadian Armed Forces in more than 50 years. His honors and awards include Commander of Military Merit, Canadian Meritorious Service Cross, Meritorious Service Medal, United States Legion of Honor and Bronze Star for service in Afghanistan, and awards from the Netherlands, Poland, and NATO. General Fraser, thank you for coming on the show today.
David, good to be with you.
So to kick it off, let's begin with the fact that Ottawa recently announced this $2 billion contract to buy 190 additional Armoured Combat Support Vehicles. This is going to bring our fleet to 550. And so to start us off, could you break down what is actually included in this announcement and what this specific expansion of support vehicles means for day-to-day operations in the Canadian Armed Forces?
Well, at the highest level, what we're doing is we're modernizing the combat service support fleet. We are rationalizing perhaps the most important thing, which is the maintenance aspect of how do you maintain a fleet of 550 vehicles. And, providing commonality amongst those fleets, and so that the men and women that will operate them will be able to service those frontline combat vehicles in a more efficient and effective manner. A lot of the vehicles that they are replacing, these 190 vehicles replacing, are probably 30 to 40 years old.
Right.
They work on different systems. They're not as capable, and they're not really up to the job of supporting the LAV 6 fleet and the LAV fleet going into the future. So from a modernization point of view, this is a big capability lift. And from a rationalization point of view, if you are the bean counters, if you are the maintainers, this can make your job an awful lot easier of actually having to sustain a fleet of 550 with one sort of supply chain as opposed to maybe 2 or 3. So from an Army point of view, this is a big step forward. And where these vehicles are going to go to, they're going to go into the service battalions. There are 3. And the Army is modernizing, where it's taking its current structure and creating a deployable, combat-capable division. And these vehicles will go into those 3 service battalions that will support those frontline brigades that will be, theoretically, defending our nation. So that is a big capability step up from what we have today. And then, there will be some vehicles that will be going down to the schools, in Borden and probably in Gagetown, where in fact that they can, people can learn to train on them and actually learn how to incorporate them into, our tactics, techniques, and procedures. One of the things is perhaps the less sexy thing in any army is the combat service support is the tail. We tend to not invest in the tail. I am a combat arms officer, and after Afghanistan, I would invest in the tail in ways that my brother would probably not be happy with, because it's all about logistics, dummy. And when you don't have it, or if it's thin, you can't just go down to Walmart or go down to Ford and buy it, because it ain't there. And I think, seriously, if we look at the lessons from Ukraine, why did the Russians fail so early on? Because of their logistical tail. Mm-hmm. It was not there. Their combat troops did a great job getting out in front, but they couldn't sustain them. And as a result of, there are other problems of generalship, but fundamentally, the logistics were really a limiting factor. And I would say again that in peacetime, and we've been blessed with peace for so long, we don't put emphasis into the less sexy things, and that's combat service support. And these vehicles represent that. I mean, we could have bought 380 of these things or whatnot, and we still would need more. But 190 is a huge step forward. So Bravo Zulu to the Army and to the government and to General Dynamics Land Systems for producing them.
And there's no doubt modern war, certainly from the latter half of the 19th century onwards, logistics has been a fundamental factor in victory versus defeat. I think even Napoleon said logistics is crucial to winning any battle and any war. So you've identified a key component, the tail, as we call it. For listeners who might not be familiar with military vehicles, what is an armored combat support vehicle? And how does that differ from a traditional tank or a frontline fighting vehicle?
So this vehicle will look exactly like the LAV-6 fleet, which is an eight-wheeled vehicle with a turret on it that's got a big gun, a cannon. But these vehicles don't have the cannon on them. What they are is the maintenance and recovery. So your mechanics. Okay, so you have your mechanics and your repair shop on wheels, as opposed to going down to the corner store and getting your car fixed. Your repair shop follows you around on the battlefield. It's armored, so it will actually protect the crew, the 2 to 3 man crew inside this vehicle, from small arms fire, from artillery fire. It will be logistics, so they will have ammunition on them. They could have supplies. They could do things that provide anything else that the organization may need, food and things like that. Transportation. So it's to move, again, people or things around. Medical support. So, if there are casualties, they can actually take the casualty, put them on a stretcher, put them in the back of one of these vehicles, and they can actually take them out of the battlefield under protection and command and control. So radios and, things like that are able to, command and manage the battlefield. So there's a whole bunch of different things that these vehicles can be configured in, but it's all the stuff that doesn't go bang. It's all the stuff that makes sure that things go bang and actually continue to go bang. And if they get broken at the time, we can fix them. And if the person inside that makes it go bang, we can make sure that person lives. So it's not sexy, but by God, it is so important. If you don't have it, you can't conduct combat operations for more than a few hours, period.
And I'm interested in how these new armored combat support vehicles compare to, let's say, the M113s or the Bisons that they're replacing, because obviously these are upgrades. You've clearly identified this is a great addition to the fleet. How can we get some of the comparisons in terms of technical specifications and why these are such an improvement?
Well, it's kind of like it's the difference between having a Chevrolet and then the next thing you know, you buy an SUV.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so they're bigger, a lot more powerful engines, so they can keep up to the vehicles that they are there to support. Because these old vehicles were, lighter, less powerful, smaller, and these vehicles are bigger. Now, the equipment that's in them are winches, tools, heavy equipment tools, so they're going to have a lot more capability that they can do more repairs and more things in the field than their predecessors did. It really is just think of the car that you have that's 30, 40 years old, and the lack of technology in that car versus the car you have today where, you can do it's more of a rolling computer than it is anything else.
Right.
I would just use our car. So the car that Dad drove versus the car that you drive, which car would you prefer to drive in?
Yes, the newer one, absolutely.
I think all of us would rather have Wi-Fi in the car than not have it. But simplistically, that's what we're going to be talking about. And the engineers get vehicles too, and the engineers again, blades, winches, power tools, and things like that. These vehicles have got all this stuff in the back, and they are very capable. Vehicle that the combat arms units, the armor, the infantry will be, very appreciative when they see them, when they come up there.
Yeah, it's interesting. You've touched on a lot of what these can be used for. So they're very multi-purpose. And when they get into the hands of our soldiers, let's say soldiers who are going into theater, is there a specific purpose, or is it kind of like this could be used for transporting medical goods? This could be used for transporting ammunition. This could be used for casualty evacuation. Is that sort of the general understanding when they're deployed, is we can slot these into different roles, or is there one role above all others that sort of ranks in terms of the usage of them?
Well, they will be configured differently.
Okay.
So once they are configured, you can't reconfigure them into, making it from a mobile maintenance vehicle into a medical vehicle. But, the Army has got figured out what units need what types of configuration, and they will apportion them out accordingly.
Right.
The military being what it is, it has an insatiable appetite. So no matter what you give it, it will always want more. It is never satiated with what you give it. And when we talk about the tail, and again, my experience would be is, we could have doubled that and we still wouldn't have given them enough, because it's just, when you're fighting in combat in the frontline troops, things break a lot faster. And the faster you can get them repaired as close to the front battle line as opposed to pulling them off the front, you can maintain operations. And that is a key component of modernization that General Wright is working on. And what this capability does, it will keep our troops engaged longer, faster, better than what we have now, where you'd have to pull it out and put it, a soft skin vehicle, put it back into a stationary base where you can actually repair it. And given what's going on with the the Iranian war and the Ukrainian war, drones, you don't want to have stationary facilities. Stationary facilities, you are exposing yourself to be destroyed. With a vehicle like this that can move around, it can go and fix something in a couple hours and move around. But if you set up a stationary facility anywhere, like what we did in Afghanistan, we were completely, in camps. That's a death sentence. So these vehicles really do not only improve the survivability of the crews inside them, and improves the survivability of the organization at large.
Would you be willing to share some of your personal experiences with the use of armored combat support vehicles, some of the challenges and successes that you encountered in commanding in theater?
Well, and Johnny Conrad was he was a MACO of the service battalion, one service battalion at the time, and he was supporting one Patricia's. And during our time in Afghanistan, a very long time ago, but the lessons learned there were the same. We did a concept of operations which was mobile. We kept moving around. We didn't try to stay stationary, and which meant our logistical tail was big and long. And at one stage in the game, it was over 100 kilometers long, where we were conducting operations in Helmand and all the way down in the southern part of Helmand. But it was over 100 kilometers. And, John Conrad and his team, which did an outstanding job, they were able to stay on the road in a plethora of vehicles. A lot of them were soft skin vehicles, but with an up armored cab to protect the driver, but not the stuff in the back. And it got to the point where the Taliban weren't stupid. Why would you attack, one Patricia's or three Van Du, which all these young pups with, weapons, and they were really warriors, and they could shoot back, go after the soft part, which is your logistic telltale, because they're driving trucks and they're not as heavily armored, and we'd have to put on security on them. But they found themselves under combat, conditions and attack more so than, in fact, the frontline troops. And now we've got, and that was in a sort of a multiplicity of lightly armored vehicles, G-Wagons, Bisons, and trucks with armored cabs on it, but nothing like what we're talking about here. And this is, we actually, throughout the time we were in Afghanistan, kept having to up armor and changing vehicles to move closer to what we're talking about today, which is, a purpose-built combat support vehicle that is uh, exactly like the armored vehicle that, was at the front that, one Patricia's and one RCR used 20 years ago. So the lessons are still the same. We're
Yeah.
now just catching up to where we were 20 years ago, where we're actually putting the right vehicle into the right scenario. So, you know, it's not a question of not doing it. It's finally come again.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we often hear terms like capability gap used when we discuss sort of the capabilities of the CAF and or the lack thereof. And obviously, you are in big favor of this addition of this fleet, which obviously is addressing a capability gap that seems to have existed. And do you think that capability gap has existed since the end of Afghanistan, or are those lessons from Afghanistan finally resonating? I mean, how does that sort of the legacy of your experiences there fit into the attempt to fix this capability gap?
Well, I think it's a function of priorities and about operational tempo and necessity. I, if you talk to the men and women in the combat service support and combat support trades, they will probably always tell you that they're probably being shortchanged for the guys and gals who are in the combat arms. I think it's a fair comment, and I think when we were in Germany, half a century ago, the tail was a lot more robust because it was designed for combat. When we got into Afghanistan, we made the tail very robust because it was real. They were doing real things to support troops that were in combat. And I think, in the last 20 years, we've probably done a lot less combat. Therefore, the tail has gotten a lot lighter. And because it's just from a priority point of view, we haven't been supported and sustained in the way that we needed to be. And I think this government has recognized that and is starting to ameliorate the gap that has been created over, 20, 30 years, but for all various reasons. And now we're starting to rectify that gap. These vehicles will go a long way to do that, along with the 1,500 Mercedes-Benz light trucks and heavy trucks that are coming in. They're coming in, and that's going to replace a fleet that's just worn out too. The Army, the Air Force and the Navy, the equipment, we buy things like every 30 or 40 years. So at the end of the life cycle, all this equipment is just worn out. From a procurement point of view, instead of buying every 30 years, in many ways, Dave Fraser would say we should be buying every year and just buy, changing your cash flow from peaks and lows to something that's more sustainable, that, you buy whatever the latest and greatest is that you can get today. But you're not going to have a symmetric capability. You're not going to have a symmetric organization. You're going to have an asymmetric organization, but one that is a lot more capable than one that kind of, thrives and starves on a 30-year cycle. And right now, the Army and the CSS is dying because it's so old. It can't keep up to where the frontline troops are. And that's the real problem here.
I'm interested in the process of training within the CAF as well, and we've talked about sort of this aging fleet and this replacement with these new vehicles. You hinted earlier that some of these new vehicles will go to the bases. So how will training on these expand or enhance CAF readiness and operational capability? And what kind of how are these used in training, if you don't mind, for the layperson who doesn't really understand how that might be applicable to these new vehicles?
Well, it starts with a school, and we go to the EME school, the RCM, the mechanic school in Borden, the logistical school in Borden. Most of Borden is all the support trades are up there. They'll get their individual training on how to be a mechanic, how to be a supply tech, how to be a medic. They'll get that individual training, and then they'll get the training on, here's the vehicle that you will be driving in. So you're going to have to learn how to be a driver. You're going to have to learn how to operate all the systems on board the vehicle. So the schools have got to get this equipment first in some ways. The last person in any organization, an army, will be actually an instructor. because it's easy to train an infantry. It's hard to train an instructor to train that infantry. And without the instructor, you can't have anything. So that instructor in Borden, for example, with this a piece of equipment is the kind of the crucible that you need to build out what the support organization, because they're all the people will come there. They'll get all the basic information from the instructor. They'll see the vehicle and how they operate as a team, because the vehicle and the soldier working in that vehicle are a team approach. In many ways, the Army arms the weapon system as opposed to man the weapon system. And, that service support, soldier really is the weapon system. And all we do is to give them a very capable vehicle, and we really make them, punch up what they can do. So the schools will be key to that, but the units themselves conduct training all the time.
Okay.
So each of these battalions in Petawawa, Valcartier, Gagetown, and Edmonton will have these vehicles, and they will be conducting courses in-house for drivers and continuity training of how to do that before they go out in the field and start using the vehicles in a tactical scenario.
So these will be distributed basically as they sort of are ready to, coming off the assembly line, they will sort of be distributed to all of these different facets at the same time? Or do you think it'll be training will get a bunch first and then they'll start distributing them to more of the combat units?
I don't know the detailed, delivery system, but normally the first vehicles come off, go to a school.
Okay.
Because, the first time you got to go up before you give them to a unit, because the first thing the unit's going to do is break them. They're going to play on them and break them. But you got to make sure that your mechanics, again, any vehicle, your mechanics and the people that technically are going to take care of them, get them first so they can actually figure out how they work and how they fix them before they give them to people like me who tend to break them. And, and in Afghanistan, I remember we got probably the best mission I was ever on for being supported. I've never been better supported by my country than there. And so it's encouraging to see what's happening now. But I remember getting phone calls, when the Nyalas were coming in with these My Improved vehicles. They said, we haven't tested them yet. And I said, look, I've got men and women in here, my maintainers and everybody. You just give me the vehicles. We'll crawl all over them. And, if we can't figure it out in a couple hours, it's not going to work anyway. But, between my mechanics, my, supply guys, my operators, and anybody they will put their hands on this thing. We'll do the learning in theater as opposed to having to wait to take it, from Canada. And I'll say, and this is where, the mechanics and the men and women that do all the support, they're absolutely brilliant, because you just give them a challenge to say, you get it. We don't know what it is, but within hours they've figured it all out.
Wow.
So I have no doubts about how this thing gets distributed, because it's just like giving a very expensive meal to a young soldier and young 18-year-old. They will be very happy to eat that for you.
That's right. I love the idea that breaking them at first is a good thing, because it can be a learning process to come, to learn how to fix it.
You have to know. Listen, you got to know this stuff, because you don't want to break it in combat and not understand what the implications of that. So that's why you got to give it a gain. The tail's got to, if I look at the F-35 fleet in the United States, their serviceability rate, which is not great, but the plane can fly, but it's all the integration of all that stuff together. One reason why they're having some problems is because their tail is not big enough. Their tail is not sophisticated enough to handle the most sophisticated airplane ever built in history. You've got to build a tail as sophisticated. And in fact, it's got to be in place before you put that airplane into operations. And so, again, if I look at the 190 vehicles and what we're doing with service support, it's catching up to where the front lines are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said.
But it's not sexy, for the troops or for the Army commander to only talk about the tail, because he's got a job to do about the front end. People most interested in the front end. Well, that's good, but you got to have a tail to support the front end.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. The historians love to write about battles, but the fact of the matter is it's logistics that get them to the front line and help them win those battles. It's an interesting.
And for me, and again, war story, I could talk about tactics and it would take, 10, 15 minutes in the morning for me. I would talk to my weatherman for 45 minutes because weather affected everything. I would talk to John Conrad and Paul McDonald, my G4, for an hour, talking about every nature of oils and ammunition and stuff that was really boring. But if you didn't get all that logistical stuff done, you didn't fly, you didn't operate in the day, period. So the front end stuff is really sexy and it's interesting, but it pales into consideration if you miss something.
Now, I want to just step back for a second and get your perspective on, obviously, this announcement is one of many announcements that have been coming out. I mean, it's clearly a nearly unprecedented period of Canadian federal investment, government investment in defense spending. I look back at like the 1950s and things like that, and during Afghanistan, where we see this type of interest. How do you think this announcement for this specific purchase fits within a larger long-term plan for modernizing the Canadian Armed Forces?
Okay, I'm going to put it into two buckets. I'm going to put it into the politically strategic bucket and the economic bucket.
Okay.
As much as the Army is salivating over all the attention, or the Air Force or the Navy, enjoy what the Prime Minister and the Government of Canada is getting you. But more importantly for Canada, defense spending unlocks a door. It is a strategic key to unlock a door to bigger issues than the military. And that key is trade. You want to look at CUSMA, that is our biggest trading door that we have to unlock, and look at what we're dealing with right now. And as the Prime Minister tries to work through that minefield, we also have to divest of ourselves to a degree of our exposure with the United States. And that means you have to unlock the door to Europe. And, by extension, to places like Korea. But if I just look at Europe, the strategic, value of defense spending, it's not a lost leader, but it is actually an investment that has a high ROI. It opens up the door to trade opportunities. And it also means politically that Canada is a real player. We have been laggards for decades when it comes to defense spending. Our, commitment to NATO, while the men and women have done great work, it has not been enough for a nation of our size. We now have a Prime Minister that's not making promises. He's putting his money where his mouth is. We just bought 12 submarines, which will fundamentally change the RCAN from being an outstanding organization to being a strategically relevant organization, because 12 submarines means we've gone from a surface fleet to a subsurface fleet, and that's actually more strategically significant today with drones than anything before. It will change the Navy. It will put Canada on the world stage. These vehicles, this combat capability of Army modernization puts Canada on the world stage strategically, and it helps the Prime Minister, sell Canada. So that is the strategic thing that this Prime Minister is doing with defense investment. And it's an investment. It's not just paying money. It's an investment because he's going to get an ROI strategically so he can do trade. Economically, this is a huge win for Canada. As much as this, $2 billion, it's about buying the vehicles, but this is about 60% of the life cycle cost of anything that we buy is in the just maintenance and support of it over the life of the vehicle or the piece of thing you buy. You buy a car for $40,000, $50,000, you're going to spend 3 times that in the life of the car on maintenance and things like that. And that money goes directly into the Canadian economy. That money of building those vehicles in London, Ontario, goes into the workers and the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers who are providing the materials for these vehicles. And that can be seats, it can be tires, it can be engines, it can be electrical, it can be paint. All of that is going into the Canadian economy. Now, the profits, yes, the profits go back to, the mothership, but, that's only about 10-15% of net margin is profit. The rest of it's going back into the local economy in some shape or form. And this is a huge investment in Canadian economy, and it's about jobs. It's about a lot of jobs. If I look at the 12 submarines, it's going to create infrastructure jobs. It's going to create maintenance jobs. It's going to create an awful lot of jobs for, both coasts, for the ship repair facility. The Army's going to get an awful lot of jobs, and Air Force is getting. This is about jobs. So you look at the billions and hundreds of billions that the Prime Minister is spending here. A lot of that money is going to be spent here in Canada. A lot. So when I see 3 to 5% GDP spending, it's actually an investment that will generate actually more wealth than anything else for this country. And given the fact that we're under a bit of a trade war, that's probably a good thing to do right now. It's not a handout, it's a leg up.
To wrap up, and you've identified an incredible amount of interesting points related to this purchase and to the broader defense environment that we exist in right now. But to wrap up, if there is one key lesson or takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with after listening to this episode, what would it be?
Defense spending is a necessity for Canadian wealth creation and economic prosperity. And in addition to that, if you accept that premise, we don't do it every 30 years. We do it every year. It may, again, be like not the sexiest, thing we want to talk about, but instead of spending, $2 billion, once every few years, maybe we're spending $300 or $400 million every year on replenishing our vehicles. We don't do life cycle upgrade of vehicles. We just buy the latest vehicle that's on the market when it wears out. This is what makes Canada credible internationally, and we don't have these yins and yanks. And the last thing I would say is it also means that, we're going to create a lot more jobs here that are sustainable, which makes our economy and our prosperity a lot better for this nation. But fundamentally, if we don't defend ourselves, someone else is going to defend ourselves. And North America is a strategic asset right now that's under attack by China and Russia. We've got to take that seriously.
General David Fraser, thank you for your service and thank you for taking the time today to come on and chat with us.
David, thank you.
And that's all for today's episode. The Expert Series is released every Friday. If you want to learn more about the CDA Institute, follow us on social media, visit our website at cdainstitute.ca, or subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates on Canadian defense and international security. If you have comments or feedback about what you heard in today's edition, email our producer Josh at cdainstitute.ca. I'm David Borys. Until next time.